Hello and welcome to the Thursday, October 4th, 2012 Audit Committee meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. Everybody is here, I see, on time, and that's good. We'll start off with the review and approve the minutes from last meeting, August 2nd. Anybody want to approve those?
Move approval, Rolfing.
Second, Aguilar.
That's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you. Well, we have a new staff member. Rich, would you like to introduce our new staff member?
Yes. Kim, you want to stand up and just say hi? And I think most of you have met her already. She's been with us about, 8 weeks or so, August 20th. Okay, and she comes most recently from Eide Bailey as an auditor. So we're happy to have Kim here.
Kim, generally we have the new committee member. No, I won't. I'll go ahead. All right, we'll lose that tradition. Very good. Thank you and welcome. Let's start off with our first report, the light and power.
I'll go up to the podium and we'll
Very good.
put it up on the screen.
Okay.
Thought we'd take advantage of the technology we have available so that if anybody is watching on Channel 16, they'd be able to see the report. This was on our audit plan for 2012. It was a regularly scheduled audit. It was our first audit of the Light and Power Division. And the city has a light department. It's part of Public Works. It's a small division with 11 full-time employees, and the city does not generate any electricity anymore. At one time, the city did. In fact, there is a very ancient generator that's still down there at the Light and Power building, but it hasn't been used probably since the 1960s, maybe. So the two main divisions, or the two main activities of Light and Power, are to resell electricity that they buy from the Western Area Power Administration or the Heartland Power, and then they resell that electricity to their customers, of which there are about 2,500 customers in Sioux Falls. And then their other major activity is maintaining the street lighting system. And the light department operates as an enterprise fund, which means that their revenues are intended to cover all their expenses, and it's not to be funded by just the sales tax or the property tax. The four objectives we had were to determine if the work requests were completed in a timely and satisfactory manner. Number two, whether the street lights that are damaged in traffic accidents were repaired timely and whether payment was collected when that happened. Number three, the supplies and materials inventories were accurate and protected from loss. And the fourth objective was to determine if the operation of buying and then reselling the power to electrical customers is reasonable. And as far as the results, that number one objective, we concluded that the work requests were completed satisfactorily and timely. And the auditor who did this did a lot of ride-alongs with the crews, multiple ride-alongs, observing what they did and just seeing what their operations were like. That number two, damaged streetlights. You'd be surprised how often streetlights get run into by vehicles. It happens quite often. And we conclude that overall the city is being repaid when this happens. Most of the time you can identify the driver and they do have insurance. In that case, we are able to recover the money to cover the cost of repairing the streetlights. Occasionally it's a hit and run and they're not able to find out who the driver was, or they are able to find the driver and that person does not have insurance. And in those cases, it's very unlikely that the city recovers money. But as I said, the majority of cases, they know who it was and they do have insurance and they're able to collect the money. Objective three was the supplies and materials. This is where we had an audit finding and we also had several recommendations. We determined that they were not maintaining an accurate supplies and materials inventory. And there were various reasons for that, but we did have some recommendations to address that audit finding. And the fourth objective was the buying and the reselling of power. We did an analysis of electrical charges from Xcel Energy, Sioux Falls Light and Power, and Sioux Valley Electric for residential, small commercial, and street lighting. And our analysis would show that most customers would receive some savings each month if they received the money from Xcel, or they received their power from Xcel rather than the city. However, we had some discussions with management, and looking at what information they presented, we conclude that most, if not all, the differences can be accounted for as overhead expenses for maintaining and repairing the streetlights. And that led into our audit finding, that first audit finding, which was that the customers are basically subsidizing the cost of repairing streetlights and maintaining streetlights. The streetlights are something that everybody benefits from, but it's the 2,500 customers that we're basically subsidizing that for the other citizens. So our recommendation was that we get out of the business, or we move those expenses of streetlight maintenance over to the general fund, which is more appropriate because everybody benefits from the streetlights. And we concluded from viewing the briefing that was made to the council back in June by Public Works, and also by discussions with management, that that is the direction that they are heading. And they hope to, by 2015, have the expenses for streetlight repair and maintenance moved over into the general fund. This year they started moving some of the labor costs over. The 2013 budget has more cost moving over to the general fund from that enterprise fund, and their intent is by 2015 they'll have all those expenses moved over so that the 2,500 customers aren't subsidizing the cost of the streetlights. At the same time, the rates that they charge their customers should be very competitive with Xcel, if not lower. So we had 5 recommendations there. You can see in your report, and we had we didn't have any disagreements with management on those. We obviously, that number 1 we just talked about, the expenses related to electrical distribution power. Public Works supports that recommendation, and as we said, by 2015 they hope to have that completed. Number 2, as far as that supplies and materials inventory, we recommend that they have a formalized policy for the management of the inventory. And the reason why you want to have good controls over inventories, for one thing, is your balance sheet needs to be accurate. Inventory is an asset. It goes on your balance sheet. And with Light Department, at the end of the year, they do a physical count. They make the adjustments. So the balance sheet should reflect an accurate inventory. But the other reason you want to have good controls is that you want to be able to detect any internal theft or irregularities with your inventory. And so you need to have a better system. So we recommend having a formal policy for check-in and check-out of materials. Public Works agrees with that recommendation. And the number 3, we recommend having a formalized work order system for both the service calls and the crew work projects. Light has looked at several work order systems. They haven't yet purchased a software program that would meet their needs. But we believe that new system will help with just the overall management of their projects, and it will also help with the accuracy of their inventory when they're working on their projects. And so for number 3, the Public Works agrees and supports that recommendation, and they're researching a work order system for the maintenance of all their assets. And number 4, we recommend that the light trucks have laptop computers installed in the cabs. We recommend it that they not be the Toughbook computers, which are rather expensive. The Toughbooks, you could pay for several laptops with the cost of a Toughbook, and our observation of the working environment in the cabs would indicate that you wouldn't need the Toughbooks, that you could get by with the laptop. And as far as number 4, Public Works did agree with that and supports utilizing a normal laptop computer. And number 5, we recommended that the city consider using another network service provider for the remote access for the light vehicles, because we observed numerous problems with the crews trying to access or trying to load the information. It would sometimes take many minutes for the information to load. And Whereas if they were in a city building, it would typically take about 5 or 10 seconds. So they're wasting a lot of time waiting for the information to load. And again, Public Works, they support that recommendation, and they'll work with Central Services to investigate an alternative service provider that could serve the remote vehicles with increased efficiency. So we were thankful for the cooperation extended to us by Public Works and the light crews, and the 5 recommendations were agreed to by Public Works, so we'll follow up on that as we always do with our audit recommendations. So if there's any other questions, I'll attempt to answer those.
Any questions for Rich? Councilor Rolfing?
Little concerned, I guess would be a good word, about the inventory situation. And I know I can understand the situation where we've got, you know, I've done it myself. You know, you go out for a project and you think you got everything in your pockets and in your truck or in your box or whatever, your toolbox, and then you get down in there and it's not quite enough, so you go back and grab another handful and you throw it in there. And I don't know exactly how to control that, but we should be large enough now that there are corporations, or there are plumbing and heating and electrical supply companies that know how to control that. We should be able to do it too in some certain way.
We think we should. And I think with a new work order system that would help if they could enter the information in the laptop and the cab of what exactly they used on that particular project.
Run it through that.
Make it easy. Because right now, when we did that sample count, it was, I think, 40% of the items we sampled were, that's not what, what we're showing according to inventory.
Yeah, and you did 2/3 of the inventory, you said.
It was not a very accurate count, and they don't have enough. It's not a big enough division where they're going to have a full-time parts person like Fleetwood and the water department. They only have 11 full-time employees. But yeah, like you said, there's probably technology there and procedures in place that you could use that would increase your accuracy, and that would help identify maybe if you're having a theft problem or you're having other issues, that maybe you identify it quicker rather than waiting until year-end physical count and then making your adjustments. So,
And probably use the savings from people running into their light poles and not having to fix it to do that.
Yeah. It was amazing how often that happens, that people run into light poles. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
You think that wouldn't happen very often, but it happens all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. And they are designed, by the way, at least the newer poles are designed to break away so that, you aren't killing people when they run into a light pole. They're designed to snap off under a certain amount of pressure. So, but obviously when that happens, they need to be fixed, and the city wants to recover that cost because the taxpayers shouldn't be, or the customers of the light utility shouldn't be having to pay that cost all the time. So.
Councilor Intiman.
Rich, on the item 1 concerning the Public Works is committed to moving all expenses out of the distribution program by the end of 2015 budget cycle.
Yeah.
Why does it take that long? It seems like that's an accounting issue. Why is it taking another 2 years to move those things around and get that out of the budget cycle? Was there a response to that?
As far as why it's taking so long, I didn't ask that specific question. We just made that recommendation, and then they had a fairly detailed response of what their timeline is and how much they're moving. I suppose it'd be quite a shock to the budget to move the entire cost over in 1 year, perhaps over to the general fund. So maybe that's the thinking, that you start doing incrementally. That'd probably be a better question for Mark Cotter or his team.
Okay. And also, if I might, also along with what Councilor Rolfing said, I am concerned too about inventory.
Yeah.
From a person that has a significant amount of inventory.
Yeah.
In a business, inventory can break you from a retail standpoint. I know this isn't retail.
No.
But again, the
But
shrinkage
they're trying to
issues-
cover their cost. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We just need to be cognizant and aware of that, and every effort needs to be made to get that done as soon as possible.
Yeah, and certainly we'll follow up with Public Works to make sure that there's progress made on getting a work order system and getting a formalized inventory procedure in place. So.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Aguilar.
Well, I'm going back to item number 1. Is there any type of liability that the city has since they have been unfairly charging those 2,500 customers
Well,
for I mean, this
thought
is
about
going to
that.
be a public
Yeah.
document if it's
Well, this has been
approved.
going on for, I mean, for decades.
But also,
Yeah.
in years past, the charges were always much less than what the other, like Xcel Energy, charged, and they have gone up substantially in
Yeah.
the last few years. So I agree. I think 2015 is, actually, that's 3 years away. So maybe we do need to address that issue with Public Works.
I would chime in as well that knowing that it's not the right practice doesn't make sense going forward to allow it to occur, even though the shock might exist.
Yeah.
Those people who are paying those electric rates, Sue's right. This is gonna turn into be a little bigger deal than I had maybe thought. That those people who are buying electricity, and there's just not everybody,
No, they're about 2,500 customers and.
small
and-
group,
Yeah, it's a small group.
but they're going to want their money back, I think is what they're going to say. And it is an enterprise fund, and that is meant to be as pure as we can keep it. So even going forward, it wouldn't make much sense. Maybe Mark Cotter and Finance have a good reason, or somebody else does, on why we would do it like that, knowing it's not right.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to add that extra concern as well, that
Yeah.
we should
And
probably.
I would say, too, that before the audit started, I mean, this was obviously kind of the direction they were going. It wasn't that because of the audit, they said, because they put in this year's budget, the 2012 budget, they put in X number of dollars for labor costs. So they had started that process, prior to our audit. Yeah.
Councilor Aguilar.
Could we ask that before, when this is presented at the informational to the full council, that Mark Cotter be asked to attend?
Well, one of the things we can do here, just so everybody's aware, is that we can choose not to accept this audit as complete and wait for further comments from staff. And then at that, until we accept it as complete, it doesn't move on to the full presentation of the council.
We could do that,
Is
certainly.
that something
Yeah.
you guys would want to do?
So would you want Mark to be at the next audit committee meeting?
Mark and Finance, I think,
Okay,
Would
so
you
our
think?
December
Finance?
meeting? Yeah.
if we can. I think that would be, I know,
We can do
is that
that.
next month?
Yeah. Well, we meet December 6th. It'll
Right,
be
so
2 months from now, yeah. So,
Councilor Jameson.
Oh, Councilor Richmond.
I agree. I think the issue here, it isn't so much that, the issue does exist, and it's been a long time practice, but I agree with everybody here. I think we need to address this a little bit sooner than that 2015 timeline. I really do. So I understand there's some questions with the budgets, but the budgets are rewritten and redone every year, and supplemental appropriations made and everything to go along with it. So I think we could make the adjustments sooner than
yeah,
2.5 years.
okay. So if I understand the committee, I can contact Finance and Public Works and have them at our next audit committee meeting to address the issue?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's the wish of the committee.
Okay.
Any other questions, though, on this audit finding, anything? Okay, very good, Rich, thank you.
Okay.
Move on to purchasing and procurement. Danette is going to do it.
The purchasing and procurement audit was part of the 2012 annual audit program that was approved by the committee in December. We came up with 3 objectives for this audit. They were that the city procurements are consistent with city policy, that the system of internal controls over purchasing and procurement process are effective, and that the sole source procurements were justified, documented, and in accordance with the city policy. Since this is a fairly decentralized process, it did cover all areas that use the procurement and purchasing system. The results were that overall, we found that the current policies and procedures for the City of Sioux Falls, along with the state of South Dakota, are being followed as established. We did have 2 recommendations. The first is that There are various departments that obtain the various quotes, and these quotes should be entered into the appropriate area of the accounting software. There is an area designated for quotes, and some departments are not entering them. They are keeping a manual filing system of those, and we just thought for purchasing and procurement's sake, as well as auditing purposes, for future reference, it would be much easier if they are located right in the accounting system and accessible to everybody. And management's response was that they would send out a memo, which they have already done, to all the departments, reminding them of the benefits of entering quotes, as well as any contract numbers into the financial system, and that memo went out already. The second recommendation was that management work with Sanford Clinic, OCC Medical, regarding the billings of the various services that they provide for new hire employment, as well as ongoing screenings for the city transit employees who are technically not city employees, so they did not fall under our city contract. So purchasing is working, their response is that they are working with human resources to get a contract in place that will be equivalent to what the city contract currently is. And they are in the process of working on that and hoping to have that completed by the end of October. So with that, if there's any questions.
Any questions on this audit? Pretty straight. Mr. Rolfing?
Move approval.
Before we do that, remember we're just accepting.
Yeah, I understand. We move acceptance, but
Okay,
I didn't hear anybody, see anybody do anything, so I thought, well.
Scott, was there anything that you wanted to add? I see you there. You came over.
This was, I believe, Danette's first audit. You guys should be very impressed. You did a very good job. I'd like to thank all of the people that do the procurement with the city, along with myself. Did a fantastic job following all the policies, procedures. That means that we're getting the word out to everybody. Everybody's doing their job, and that's the key, that we are protecting the taxpayer dollar here. So kudos to them. I sent them out a big attaboy, and I look forward to it in the new financial management system. I think, I hope that we don't have any more recommendations, to be quite honest with you, but that isn't always the case. But it was a good audit. It was one that I personally asked for last year when you guys were putting your plan together, and I support the findings that you had, and changes are being made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Danette. We have a motion to accept the audit report.
Second, Aguilar.
It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good, thank you. All right, we'll move on to our new audit ideas.
Yeah, and I think you can see them on your screen there. I think we have them all up there. So I had gone to several seminars this spring, and some of the ideas that I had gotten from this continuing education was to do more continuous auditing. And so these are some ideas I just put on paper, and I sent this over to finance and got a little bit of feedback from Scott. For example, we talked about that first bullet point, looking at purchase orders over $2,500. Now, Scott would say we probably need to adjust that figure. And so if we start doing that, we'd come up probably with a different number. I happened to pick that because that had been in a purchasing manual from a few years ago. But Scott and I talked about that. We'd probably pick a different number as a dollar threshold. And if we ran a report like that, we'd be looking to see that purchase orders over a certain dollar threshold had either a contract number, an agreement number, or they had a sole source justification. Another thing that we can look at and perhaps run a report on is just or monitor is the top overtime earners to see that nothing looks unusual. Obviously, if we have a snowstorm, we're going to have a lot of overtime in public works, and that's to be expected. But if we saw some anomalies, that'd be something we'd follow up on with management. Something we could look at the end of the year is looking at expense counts that were way over budget. Perhaps you had budgeted, $100,000 and you came in at $250,000. That'd be something you might want to look at. You can run programs to look at that. Same way with the revenue counts, those that are way below expectations. If you had budgeted or anticipated $50,000 in revenue and you got $10,000, It could be a case of maybe the revenue is recognized somewhere else in a different general ledger account, or you just, something happened during the year, had a recession, or, it's possibly you have fraud. I mean, that's not likely, but that's something you look at as an auditor, something we could monitor. The other bullet point was complaints. If departments do keep a log of customer complaints, I don't know if they do or don't, but that'd be something that you could review with management. You'd be looking for patterns of suspicious activities. A lot of times a fraud will become apparent because of a customer complaint, and you certainly want to follow up on that one. Next bullet point, that'd be sort of a fraud indicator. A lot of fraud schemes need the fraudster, to be at work all the time, and consequently they won't take vacation or very little vacation. That's something you could monitor, run vacation used reports, and monitor that with our Human Resources Department to see if there's a good explanation for that. Yeah. Next bullet point, we've actually done this a couple of times in the last 5 years. You can look at your accounts payable vendors master file and look to see which vendors have no physical address. They just have a P.O. box number. There are cases, what you call them ghost vendors or phantom vendors, where a vendor is set up that doesn't really exist and they're just sending invoices to the city, or you'd want to look at those vendors that have just a P.O. box and just see, well, what are we buying from them? What do we know about this vendor? And it's just a way of continuous auditing. The next one there is the top 10 most important reconciliations. That was an idea from a seminar. The idea is what gets watched gets done concept, and these reconciliations would be stuff that should already be going on. You wouldn't want to be creating a process or a procedure for a department that doesn't already exist, but you would want that reconciliation to be sent to internal audit, whenever it's done, whether that's monthly or quarterly or yearly. For example, the monthly reconciliation of the primary bank account. We send an unclaimed property list to the state treasurer's office every year with all the checks that we sent out that weren't cashed, and that's unclaimed property, and there's a list that goes to the state treasurer and see if that's being done and that the appropriate journal entries are made in the accounting records. There's things with payroll, with the IRS Form 941, taxes withheld. We do collect sales tax from customers, and we have to remit that to the state. And in health insurance, you have premiums that you collect from your employees, and there's things that you want to run on that to make sure that their proper premiums are being collected. If somebody had selected family coverage, but they're only having the single coverage amount taken out of their paycheck, you probably want to know about that before it went on too long. So these are things that we'd work with management on. The idea is not to create more work for departments. And the other thing that I want to be cautious about is creating a list of what I'd call false positives, where you come up with a list every month and you send that to management and say, here, tell me about this. And, you give them 20 things, and you can create a lot of busy work that are false positives. So if it was something that we can investigate from our audit end, that we wouldn't have to necessarily tie up staff time. But certainly there's things that we can be doing on a continuous basis, things that we've done in the past, but maybe just make it more regular. And so I just wanted to give the committee an idea of things that we'll maybe start doing in 2013, and work with management to see what would have the most value. Maybe there's some things that they're already monitoring, and so we don't want to necessarily be doing over monitoring or over auditing, but I think there's things that we can use with the technology available to do more real-time auditing. So,
Councilor Rolfing.
With the new system we've purchased now and are in the process of installing, I'm assuming, and starting to work with, shouldn't there be a way where we can identify some of these things, and automatically at the end of each month, you would be one of the reporters?
Yeah, I think there's ways to do that. I think we work with finance and we decide what reports we can get from Tyler. what reports would be useful, and we
I know,
just-
we do that at our work, that, every month I get a few, every end of month, every week, I get a few reports that I look over and see some reports that where the graph or where the charts are, where it's going, trending, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. And those would be the kind of things that they're going to want. And along with you getting, I mean, the nice thing about that is everybody's getting them at the same time.
Yes.
And you'll be able to monitor the same way.
And also the advantages too is when you're not taking a sample, you're looking at all your transactions in that period, 100% sampling, in other words, looking for, however you filter the data. So you can dig down into it, and then whatever would merit further investigation, you can kind of flag those things. So.
Councilor Entenmann.
One that kind of strikes me as somewhat interesting is during the budgeting process, we always talk about salaries. We talk about overtime.
Yes.
Things like that too. And I know that second bullet point you had, top overtime earners. One of the questions that I would have, not necessarily with the earners, I'm curious about department procedures. Mm-hmm. Who has the authority to do the authorizing?
Yeah.
Is there a procedure dealing with that?
Well,
The accountability, and is it tracked? So my question would be, are we in line asking those questions as part of the audit, Rich?
Well, it's interesting you brought that up. I'm compiling the 2013 annual audit plan. I sent the email out to the council members last week and the directors, and had already penciled in overtime audit for next year. We did the fire department this year.
Okay.
And after that, we thought it'd be a good idea to look at departments that have a lot of overtime, Public Works, the police department, and do an audit of that, exactly those questions. What is your departmental procedure? How do you authorize the overtime? How do you monitor the overtime, control the overtime? Are there ways to save money? So I think we're likely to put that on our annual audit plan for your consideration.
Okay.
And then there's certainly some monitoring that can be done. And I suspect that management is already doing that. I think HR probably gives a list every month or every payroll period to departments for the review, so they can see where who's earning overtime in their division. Yeah.
One more question. Is it appropriate to ask Scott a question?
Yeah.
Scott, for you, concerning these purchase orders, and, Rich talks about that $2,500, and I know there's, what are your thoughts along?
Well, just so you do know, the new system with Tyler is going to be set up so it is going to be a lot more, it's going to be easier to extract information from that system. It is going to be very audible. It's going to be transparent, a lot of those good things. $2,500 is probably too low, I guess. We'll come up with a dollar amount that'll work. The procurement policies and procedures are going to be really, they're going to be kind of turned on their head a little bit in a way that we've got a different plan on how we're going to attack procurement with the new system. Okay. And we're going to roll that out hopefully within the next month to the users to kind of take a look at that and see what they think. So we're still working on the design as we are still implementing this new system. It's just part of the process that we need to go through to get the system up and running. And we're a long ways away from that, from our July 1 go live date, but you got to set up a design, and we're not there yet. But once we get that design, that's when we can kind of talk with Rich and see what will work for us.
Good, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, very good. I would maybe ask the other committee members, and some of those with accounting experience, the CPA experience, certainly we lean on you guys to make sure that we have coverage of practices that Rich is doing on auditing. But maybe in your experience, have you seen any fraudulent type activities that you are working with your clients? You don't need to share with who they are or what amounts of any sort, but any ideas that were unusual that maybe uncovered something that we haven't already considered?
Well, I would say that in general, this is a good starting point. The thing to keep in mind is that once the fraud committers know what you're looking at, they find a different place to commit fraud. So they tend to be pretty crafty and try and stay one step ahead of you. So sometimes you have to look at things that aren't necessarily susceptible to fraud. Because where's the most obvious place to hide something? Well, here. So let's not look there because that's the most obvious place. They think we're going to look there, so they're going to be putting it somewhere else. So that'd be one thing that I would say. You know, that unfortunately there are more ways to commit fraud than you can think of, and they'll just continue to invent more ways to try and stay one step ahead of those trying to detect the fraud.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of just adapting, and the problem is it's different for every client that I have. It's different for every department that the city has. So you aren't going to be able to blanketly apply the procedures across the board. You're going to have to tailor it to pretty much each department and every level you look at.
I think it's a lot of discussion with management on this and where they think the risks are and what they're already doing. One thing I'm doing a fraud risk assessment right now. I've been talking to each director individually, doing interviews, and something that I wasn't aware of was the use of eBay and Craigslist by fraudsters. They take city assets and then they steal them and then they put them on Craigslist or eBay and they sell them for a profit. And I've spoken to 2 departments now that they monitor that now for situations where their assets may show up there. So
A light and power inventory or something like that.
yeah. A case I just read about on the internet 2 days ago. It wasn't our city, obviously, but it was a library director in some city who had ordered material for the library system. And the city paid for it, and then the library director put it on eBay and pocketed the proceeds. So, like you said, fraudsters can be very, very clever and look for new opportunities that come along. So,
Right, okay, very good. Thank you, Committee Member Forbes, for that. All right, then we'll move on to changes to the internal audit charter.
yeah, I think she'll call that up on the screen there. The internal audit charter was adopted by resolution back in 2006 by the City Council, and as the lead auditor, it's my job to review that from time to time and recommend changes. So this is the first time I've actually recommended any changes to the charter, and I think as Kim, if you want to scroll down a little bit to the next page there, there's 4 references into the charter of yours truly reporting to the city clerk, which is no longer the case now. Our organization chart for the city has changed now, where I have a direct line to the audit committee and no dotted lines. So the 4 references in the charter, I just did kind of a cross out where it says, secondary reporting, or the city clerk is the direct supervisor. So that just would reflect the change in the org chart that's been in place for about a year now. Kim, you want to scroll down? Okay, and the next one in the red there, I just added a line about as far as developing the annual audit plan. It's something we already do. I just said requests and suggestions from elected officials will be considered in the development of the annual audit plan. So we're just putting something in there that's already common practice. So if you keep scrolling. Again, the references to city clerk have been crossed out. And then we have a new fraud control policy that has been developed. It's gone through the fiscal committee, and we will be putting it on the agenda for the full council. So I just amended that little bullet point to say that we'll assist in the investigation of suspected fraud in accordance with the fraud control policy, just to make that consistent with that. And then the last item I added, just to indicate that I'm the supervisor for the internal audit staff, which is in their job description, and that I prepare their annual performance evaluations. So, and then if you keep scrolling, I think I just added a line under professional standards that we'll comply with the Code of Ethics of the Institute of Internal Auditors, as well as the auditing standards. And then the final endorsement page, if we do that, obviously the names would change. We had the chair of the audit committee at the time, the mayor at the time, the council chair at the time. One question I had for the city attorney was, if you scroll back up, Kim, there under, go down slightly. Keep going. Yeah, keep going here. Under, okay, where it says amendment of the charter. it says any amendment is subject to review and approval by the audit committee. So my question for the city attorney will be, does that mean the audit committee can just make the changes and then we're done with it? Or if we make changes as a committee, does it then go to the full council and get approved by resolution as it did originally? So, and the other question which I had brought up at our last meeting in August was my job title. I'd given you a list of the most common names for the chief audit executive. And we do have that on the PowerPoint. I think we have it in the folder. But anyway, the most common title was city auditor, but certainly there's quite a variety of titles. There's audit manager. There's director of internal audit. I spoke to HR. I wasn't able to get a hold of Bill O'Toole. He is out of the office for a few days, but I talked to Angie Youthy, and she said certainly if the committee wanted to change my job title, that'd be something we need to discuss with HR if there's any implication of changing a job title. As I said, lead internal auditor is not used by any other cities that have an internal audit function. It's not a common title at all. And so if you would agree to change the title, then we'd change that in the internal audit charter. Instead of lead internal auditor, we'd change it to whatever we agreed on. So that's.
Any questions? I got a few. There's other questions, though. Councilor Aguilar?
I believe that we did receive an email from Director O'Toole about the name change months ago.
Oh, did
Yeah, and,
right after.
And so I was just going to see if I could find it, and because I don't recall.
Well, go ahead. Can you search?
I'll search.
While we maybe cover some of the other items.
Yeah. Well, I think one title that would be out would be director, because the city normally uses director for, what we used to call department heads, like Mark Cotter and the fire chief.
No,
So.
I have an audit file.
One of the things, if nobody else has anything, is the approval process. Certainly, I would recommend that this committee come up and finalize those revisions, but bring it to the full council for their approval, because it is a charter that was approved by the whole council at that time. And would that make sense to everybody? Sure. I think that's proper. The other one was had another one. I would say the follow-up on, we do a lot of things where we have these recommendations that are made, and this probably isn't necessarily for changes. I guess just a discussion point was the follow-up. Do we do a follow-up report on all the follow-ups?
Yeah. I do it usually at the beginning of the year. I'll do just an update. We do that, and we did have a procedure or protocol that that the committee approved a couple of years ago on kind of how that was supposed to work with kind of the timeline and so I think we have a policy in place, and obviously if the department doesn't agree with the recommendation, they're not going to do it. I mean, and I don't know if we can make them as a committee. And that's
all right, fair enough.
But certainly, if they agree to the recommendation, we certainly want to follow up on that.
Mostly that we have a report that I didn't realize we had.
Yes.
Councilor Aguilar found it?
I did find it. And basically, what Director O'Toole is saying is that he didn't have all the information pertaining to it, but what he's saying are that he had some quick thoughts, and he wanted to know if job duties had changed, and if so, that your job description should be reviewed. I don't think that that's the case.
No, it's more the title.
But I think what the bullet point that makes the most sense to what we're discussing right now is, generally speaking, we do want to ensure we are using sound industry benchmark job titles so we can make a good market pay comparison. And I think that from what you're saying, what the industry, the titles that the industry does utilize, but I would strongly encourage that we do anything that this committee comes forward with, that before final approval, we do put it before the HR department. And he does recommend if there are any changes to the lead auditor's job description, that they should first go to the chair, and then the chair would then just have it reviewed by HR.
Councilor Wolfman.
Two things, if I may. The other thing I remember about that is that we need to be careful because a name change could slip into a different pay grade and all that kind of thing. So we need to be very careful with some of those things, so that we don't put you into a lesser pay grade.
Yes.
Or
Unless you volunteer.
wait a minute, was I thinking wrong? The other thing is, and not to be negative here, and I don't mean it that way. Please don't take it that way. But I'm trying to think. Do we have a way of auditing the internal auditor at one time or another? And that may seem very negative, but I'm just thinking that, do we need to do that? Is that appropriate?
Well, you can request peer review, and the association we belong to, the Association of Local Government Auditors, can provide that service.
Is that the way that's done?
Yeah, they would normally do a peer review. You have to request it, and they're pretty low cost. If you go through them, they would just charge the cost of having auditors from another city, the travel cost.
Okay.
They wouldn't charge anything above that. The airfare and the per diem and all that.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
not thinking we need it or anything like that. I'm just thinking, we do things on a regular basis with everybody else. I'm just wondering, to keep everything above board, it might not be a bad thing to look at on a semi-regular basis.
Did you ever see the movie The Untouchables? All right, well, anyway, Councilor Aguilar.
Yes, I did find, as I scrolled down, one other thing that we need to take into account is that the title is used in ordinance, so it doesn't just mean a resolution or a change, by this committee. There would have to be ordinance changes also.
Very good. The first thing that came to my mind was looking at the list real quick, and you guys could all look at it if you haven't got it, but
I can put it up on the screen. So.
maybe why don't you just because I think it's fair to move this along and maybe get it to HR for them to review. And the only one that just popped out at me was internal audit manager. That's what seems to be used a lot. It wasn't abrasive to the HR from what I remember with Bill. Didn't include the word director, so and it's used by all these other cities. So just a thought. If anybody wasn't overly offended, we could move that along versus, but that was just an idea. So if somebody's got some ideas, we should really maybe settle that.
Manager.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
it's
he's
up on the
going to.
screen there. You can see the municipalities that have an internal audit department. Oops, I got the wrong one there. From 1 to 5 auditors, and there's a variety of titles there. There's audit manager, and like I said, city auditor, director of audit services. But so
The problem we had with city auditor was potentially a confusion of working.
Responsibilities,
Yeah.
tasks.
Or answering to the administration versus the independence of the audit, internal audit,
yeah,
right? Wasn't that what city auditor was a problem?
yeah.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
It's an internal audit function, it's not city auditor.
I do like your suggestion, internal audit manager. I would suggest that maybe we pass that on to Bill. And, I'm just curious, I just want to make sure, along with what Councilor Rolfing said, that it doesn't, the category, employment category or whatever, makes sense, that everything makes sense for us. And then whatever we have to do after that, Counselor Aguilar, if that's through whatever we got to do to move it on.
Yeah,
I
make sure
agree
we
with you,
cover
Greg.
all the proper places in the ordinance. And any other suggestions? Councilor Aguilar?
Would you like me to resend that memo from Bill to the council?
I think it's really probably just beneficial to get it started. Have Rich or I will get it to Bill to have him start reviewing that name if there's no other names and see if there's an objection to that or concern, and then just. I think, does that work for you guys, everybody? Just to start the ball moving.
Sure, makes sense.
Is there a deadline of any sort, Rich, that you were trying to, or we need to? Or
Well, we should probably do it, you know, in the next, maybe by the end of the year, hopefully have something, but
Should it be in conjunction with the?
I think it should be in conjunction. Once, if we decide on the name change, and then we would make the change probably to the internal audit charter because the title is in there numerous times, and then we'd have to make the ordinance change.
Right.
That I think the ordinance established the audit committee. That's probably where the
Yeah.
title comes in, that ordinance. Yeah.
I would suggest that if you have the time to go ahead with it, Counselor.
I'll make sure that I get it to Director O'Toole and make sure he gets back to us with any concerns and move it forward. I will.
Yeah.
Councilor Aguilar, did you have
Well,
something?
there would need to be a change to, because in the ordinance itself is the reporting to the city clerk.
Oh, it's in the ordinance? Okay. Yeah, we definitely need to change that then. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I would agree that doing it all at the same time would
Be
be
the
what would
cleaner.
be appropriate.
Clean way to do it, yeah.
So, yes.
Going back to what Councilor Rolfing brought up earlier, I'd like to suggest that we take a look at what some of the peer review practices and possibilities are, and, get a sense of rotation of that event in other offices, or, we don't need to follow a model. We can come up with a schedule of our own and maybe consider establishing a schedule of every so often, every nth year, we engage in a peer review. And then I'm assuming that if you request a peer review, can you also make your services available to be a reviewer for other?
Yes. If you successfully pass a peer review with ELGA, then they would ask that you would be available to serve. And the costs are simply, normally the way it worked is they'd have 2 auditors come to Sioux Falls and you'd pay their travel costs, and they'd be here 3 or 4 days, and then you would agree subsequently to do the same service for another city if you passed. But if we follow the Red Book standards, which is in our charter, which is at IIA, Institute of Internal Auditors, I believe it's every 5 years, I think, is their
That would be in
recommended
line with the
frequency.
AICPA peer
Yeah.
review, I think.
3. We go every 3 years.
Yeah.
That's the point I was going to make, is that
Yeah.
as a practicing public accountant, we are subject to peer review on a 3-year basis.
Yeah, and that's that under the Yellow Book standards, which is the federal government auditors. They go with that 3-year cycle, but the IIA is a
Don't want
5-year
the feds.
normally. So
We don't like the feds.
The mothership, the federal government, Councilor Rolfing, how do you feel about the recommendation
I
from
would
Committee Applicant?
agree with Ann that we
Okay.
need to look at the opportunities. Perhaps you could report back to us.
yeah, I can give you an
At
update
the
on
next,
that.
at the
Yeah.
next meeting, of
I
what
can
the
do that.
opportunities would be, what the potential costs would be, and how much we'd all have to divvy up to get it done.
Yeah, find somebody from Omaha or Sioux
Yeah,
City,
yeah.
not Miami.
No, not Sioux City.
Okay, well, very good then. I think what we'll do then is, just to follow up to make sure I got this right, is I'll check with Bill, I'll send this on to Bill O'Toole, get his feedback. And Rich will check on the peer review cost, but as well, the internal audit charter itself, there's recommendations in here, and we should probably, at some point, and maybe it's at our next meeting, frankly, when we have a name that's been approved by and more likely accepted by the HR department of the city, we have some of these other details finalized, we could maybe finalize our review of it at our next meeting, and then take it from there to the full council. Does that work, or timeline?
December 6th would be Thursday, December 6th would be our next scheduled meeting.
Will that give us time to get this to full council and approved before the end of the year?
It'd probably be in 2013 before you'd be able to get, well, possibly. It's kind of
There
pushing.
isn't a needed deadline here, I was thinking? Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
Rich might evaporate
Yeah.
at some point, but
But it looks like we'd have to have a resolution and an ordinance that we'd bring forward to the full council. It's possible you could get that last meeting in December, possibly. Otherwise, it'd probably be in January. So, no. Yeah.
Councilor Entenmann's.
Along with what Ann said too, and her suggestion that we look at the audit of our auditor, I'd just like maybe a brief, if you could put together an executive summary of the things that they look at in that. I'd just like to be informed as far as what they do.
in the peer review?
Yeah, as long as with the
we can do that.
the fees, Rich, would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. We got that set. We'll move on to open discussion. Anybody have any open discussion items?
Just a reminder, the meeting, December 6th, it should be on your calendar. We put it out in the schedule at the beginning of the year, so.
Okay, very good. We had this come up last time we met, that we had a member of the audience who wanted to participate and give us some public input. So out of, we haven't settled it or discussed it amongst us, I guess, fully, whether we should have public input as a part of the agenda, and if so, where would we put it? And I wanted to bring it up so we didn't forget it, but also make sure that we ask the public here if there was anybody who wanted to give us input, that now would be that time until we make any other changes or adjustments. Any thoughts or comments about how to handle that? Councilor Aguilar.
Well, I guess that I would think that it would be appropriate to have public input after Rich's initial presentation on the audit, in case they, did have a comment or whatever. We do that with our other committees, where we do allow them to the public to come forward and speak to the information. And when it is presented at the informational meeting, we don't take public input at our informationals. So I think that could have some impact on whether we decide to send it forward to the council or not.
It's an interesting,
I don't know.
It's an interesting thing, because the public input on a report that is only being accepted by this committee, and somebody could step forward and give us who knows what kind of information, and then we would be dealing with it as a testimony, and it hasn't been done before, and I'm not sure if there was a reason it was always left out, or if it was just omitted for some reason. Councilor Entenmann.
If we do give public input, why not just allow it at the beginning of the meeting versus after the meeting and after the reports are given? I'm trusting that the staff that we have in internal audit has spent a lot of time and energy looking into issues that might be there, or looking into this specific case. And I'm not going to sit here and listen to somebody, excuse me for saying this, but from the outside, who has not been part of the process that we have here. We take the reports seriously, and then we do pass them on. And this is a tool by which we're assuring ourselves that we're acting appropriately, or we're following the appropriate procedures. So maybe there might be a person from the public that might have some suggestions as far as areas or things that maybe we should look at auditing. So therefore, I think if we do allow for public input, I do believe that should be at the very beginning of the meeting, that we need to deal with our staff, the presentation from the staff. If we have questions, just like we did today, where we're concerned about something and we asked to delay our action until we had some more questions, that is our responsibility to do that. So I guess that's the way that I will look at it, Counselor, if we were looking at moving it forward.
Oh, fair enough. Councilor Wolfing.
I'm going to take a little different stance, Councilor Enneman. In the meetings that I've been responsible for here, and I would, maybe it sounds a little, opposites of when you talk about urban ag and then some of the other ones with land use. I found that getting the experts' opinion out first, these guys, sometimes answers all the questions that the public has, and then you get different public input, and sometimes less because their questions have been answered, rather than having all the public input at first, and then their questions are answered afterwards. And so you kind of save some time, and people think a little bit more about what has been said and what the experts, the input that they've given, and they've got a little bit more information to work with when they do give input. So I would suggest that we do it right after the reports that the lead internal auditors or the auditors are giving, so that they can have the same information that we have at that time, and perhaps have many or most of the questions that they have answered.
Councilor Intiman.
I will respectfully disagree with you, Rex, but that's okay. I just wanted to share with that. That's great. Thanks.
One of the thoughts I was having listening maybe is that in our other committees and other meetings, we're developing policy. We're setting up something new, potentially new legislation that could affect the public. This body is really just reviewing current activities and meant to be internal, and the place for the public here is, like when we make these changes to the charter, they'll have a chance to participate at the full council meeting at a public hearing then. We were ingrained to allow the public to participate, and I'm just thinking about it before we just go and.
And again, these are internal operations that already exist within the group, and some of the testimony that we had, or having people here where they said that they requested it, they've requested it just because they want to make sure that they're confident in what they've done in the direction that they're going inside those departments. Again, I agree with that thought that you had. This is an internal thing, and we're being responsible, and we're making sure that we're responsible for actions of our respective departments and that things are following the procedures the right way. If we need to tweak the procedure, recommendations come up that way from the audit committee. I'm extremely confident in the way that they're making their presentation, and I do believe that the best place, again, for public input, if we're going to allow public input for this committee, would be at the beginning of the meetings, where we're soliciting input from them that might be useful in the direction that we might go in requesting additional audits or those kinds of things. I'll tell you what, when I have an audit done internally in my company for whatever reason, it's something that I use to shape the way that I operate and I perform so that I can better serve my customers. And that's the purpose of the internal audit, is to look at that. And I don't really believe that it is an appropriate deal to get in a situation where we're challenging the thought process of those that have requested us to do the audit. Or if there's a reason that we requested an audit, there's a specific reason for it, and we need that information for ourselves so that we can better make the decisions that we need to make on the part of our. And I'm confident that all of us ask those questions because that's the purpose of the audit.
Maybe the answer here is to have Rich maybe check with some of the other communities on how their internal audit committees are run, if they allow it. This is televised. Isn't it televised, or is it just recorded? Is it? So if it's live on television and it's recorded and forever saved on the internet, the idea is that we're in this room for the process of being transparent about what we're doing and talking about. That's half the mission, is being transparent, allowing the public input. It isn't meant to deny them access to us. It's just that what we're going through, I think, is. But That's just mine, so let's have Rich maybe check on, maybe, would that work for you guys? On just what other communities do and how they do it. And maybe, as well, I should say, I would check with, if you look at the charter, there's a guy who signed it there at the bottom that I know pretty well. And I could ask him what some of their thoughts were in the visionary stages of doing this. And I think it was the actual legislative, came out of a recommendation from the state to do it. So just let's do a little research, okay, before we jump into setting it up. Does that work? Okay, very good. Anybody? Anything else? Seeing none, just adjourn. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.